All right, good afternoon. I'm Andy McNeil, and I'm here with my co-host, Matt Duffield, and this is Free Arkansas. And today we've got Bruce Cozart, Representative Bruce Cozart, and we're excited to talk to him. We're going to talk broadly about education. But before we get into that, I want to just do two things. I just want to say a little bit about what we're trying to do. So here at Free Arkansas, it's all about the free expression of ideas. And what we're really trying to do is take a look at where Arkansas ranks on all sorts of different lists, good and bad, and then basically pose the question about how can we make it better? And what's really important? Is something on a list that important? And if it is, how can we improve it? And so that's sort of the general gist. Matt, you want to say anything else about our purpose?
I think you summed it up, Andy. So Bruce Cozart, and I'll say this on a personal note, I call him the Larry Bird of the house. So I just finished my second term, and I believe, Bruce, you've been down there for what I think 80 years now. I think is right. I think
pretty close.
You went down with President Taft, I believe, was in. But no. On a serious note, though, Representative Cozart is a guru of education, is what I call him. But that's not it. He's not just limited to that. I mean, Bruce says. He founded Bruce Cozart Construction back in 1977, so he's done a lot of different construction projects, and he's involved in his church down there, First Assembly of God Church down in Hot Springs, which is where he represents. And I know you like to fish, hunt, do some outdoor stuff. But Bruce, thank you so much for being here. I know you're coming in. So this is going to be, you're in your 7th term, is that correct, as a state representative?
That's correct. That's correct.
And I see here you are you're co-chair of the Joint Performance Review Committee, yes. And of course you're on the House Education Committee, which is given. You're also on the Agri-Forestry and Economic Development Committee, and you also serve on ALC, which is the Arkansas Legislative Council. So that's some great committees to be on. And Bruce, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Free Arkansas today.
Yeah, Bruce, can you give us kind of the history? Where'd you grow up, and how did you decide to get in politics, and just business, et cetera? Can you give us the highlight film?
I'll do it. Okay, so I'm Bruce Cozart, state representative for District 91 here in Hot Springs, Garland County area. I grew up right here in Garland County, actually born and raised in Piercy, Arkansas. Not Percy, but Piercy. And that is right out west side of Hot Springs, headed towards Glenwood. Lake Hamilton School is in that area. That's where I went to school, graduated from there. Came back, served on the school board there for about 10 years, president of my class in my senior year there. So that's home for me. That's my alma mater. And I work hard for that school, but I still represent 2 other schools in that same area. But we have 7 great schools in Garland County. They're all good. We try to represent them all. But there's one thing I tell people: we don't just represent our area; we represent the whole state. We have to take care of our whole state. So I'm glad to be here and talk with y'all, and I'll try to answer your questions. I won't say I'm the guru of education, but I've served in it, chaired it for 4 terms. There's a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of people that are a whole lot smarter than me, and that's just about 99 of the others in the house, So, but I'm glad to be here.
Did by chance are you in where Westerman was before, or was he in an adjacent district?
No, he's in Garland County, but he was in a different district.
Got it.
I went in at the same time that Bruce Westerman went in. He served with us for 2 terms in the House, and then he moved up to the big house, is what we call it.
He moved to the big house, didn't he? Yes.
Did. And he's a great guy. He's doing a great job for us up there.
Well, now, here's my first question. So, Matt, and tell me who your competition was last week, Matt, at Cherokee Village, but don't say who won just yet. Who was your competition in the pie eating contest?
Well, the only competition I was really concerned about was Representative Trey Stein.
That's the one.
That was the legislative competition.
So I've loved this. So Bruce, if you had to guess, who won the pie eating contest?
Well, I would sure bet Matt did.
I would bet Matt. Well, Matt is super competitive. And so, but what he did is he promised me he was going to bring me back a cake. or a pie or something, but I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for the coconut cream pie or whatever.
Well, I can't keep up with Andy. You're jet setting all over the world, man. You're going to be from Hawaii one week, you're from Dubai the next. I mean, I can't keep up with you.
You know, Matt, one of the things we should do is we should get some pies from somebody who makes them in Arkansas, and then do a pie eating contest, live.
Man. Well, I won't let me just say this too. So Bruce and Andy, this contest, it was, just so you know, so envision this, we're at a table, we have a pie crust full of blueberry pie filling. We could not use our hands to eat, so we had no utensils, couldn't use our hands, and it was 2 minutes, and you'd eat as much of that pie as you could. And let me tell you, man, there was some big old boys up near Cherokee Village. There was two guys that finished the complete pie. I mean, wiped it clean, the crust and everything, and another one missed it by, I think, one bite. And I'll be honest, I think Representative Steinle and I were probably at a tie. I think we, I'll be generous and say we finished half the pie, but I'm not sure it's kind of a blur, when you bury your face in blueberry filling. But it was fun, and hey, it's for a good cause. And Cherokee Village, they were great folks, welcomed me with open arms. There's probably 500 people there. Had a great conversation with their mayor. He was a good guy. Of course, Representative Bart Schultz, he's up in that area, and Senator John Payton, he was there as well. Payton was a judge. He didn't partake in the pie eating contest with us, but he did judge the pies with us. So it was a great time.
I remember back in education. Do you remember when Huckabee went and was looking at consolidating school districts? Do you guys remember that back in the 2002, 4?
That's been a while back, but yes.
Yeah. It was it was sort of maybe a noble pursuit in the sense that, he would make this argument that, hey, look, if your kid can catch a pass, we've got coaches in every school all over the state of Arkansas. But if in fact they were great at chemistry, you might not be so lucky. And they were using statistics about the number of people with chemistry degrees going into teaching. And I remember it was super unpopular because most of the time, and I'll just use Pope County where we're from, Hector didn't want to combine with Dover. There's just no way that was going to be popular at all. And people had a lot of pride in their school. So I guess my question for you two is if we're ranked low or have these gaps, how important are these gaps to fill? If people look at their school districts and are just happy with the status quo.
Well, I think now we've came a long way since Huckabee was there back in 04 and 03 in those areas there. We've made a lot of changes where those teachers may not always be available for every school, but we have a community college that's close enough that those kids can move over and try to get some of those skills and some of those classes at other places. So we've come a long ways. Not everybody. We still have some far-reaching school districts out there that probably can't get a chemistry teacher or, a calculus teacher. There's all kinds of things that may not be available to them, but they can do a lot of that online. Chemistry's hard online, but they can get what they need now a lot better than they used to could.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially online. It makes it a little better. And even the Access Act had some pieces about concurrent education in the fees. Matt, you got a view on this?
Yeah, well, I think, Bruce, you brought up an interesting point, not to veer off here, but you brought up the, online courses. I guess maybe we can discuss that, for a moment, because, there's this big push statewide, broadband internet access to be in every nook and cranny of the state. And I've always seen that, it's always brought up, we want the child that lives out, a good ways out from the city to have the internet access for these online courses. But I guess my question for you, Bruce, would be, what is your opinion of, because, one thing with your generation, my generation, Andy's generation, we didn't even have internet back when we were in school. I mean, I think we were getting Nokia phones back in 2002 when I was in high school. But what is Bruce, what's your opinion on this, an online class versus in-person teaching? How's that changed? Kind of, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm always for in-person teaching. I think that is the best way to learn. Online is the second best, because if you can't get an in-person teacher, then online is going to be something you need to do if that's what you have to have. But it's always in-person teachers are going to do better. Now, it's always hard if you've got a big class and it's and it's one teacher trying to teach 30 kids, that's a little different, but that's usually what we have. But it's still better. Online is still going to be the same way. You're learning, but one teacher's teaching it, but there's probably many people listening to her. But it seems to be more one-on-one with an online. But I'm an in-person type person. I think it's always better. I think the kid gets a better education that way.
When we look at the rankings for Arkansas related to education, and quite frankly, there's a lot of things that we can rank. And so this is just some high level rankings, and we're going to put a bunch more out there. But from a K through 12 perspective, Arkansas ranks 38. So that's, the bottom third. Our graduation rate in the K through 12 is 42. That's in the bottom third. Graduation rate at higher education is 42. That's also in the bottom third. Higher education ranks overall 41, again in the bottom third. And one of the things that I think about this sometimes, and I think about this related to really like other ways of people measuring, I don't feel like when I look at my own children and what they were able to do in Arkansas schools, which they went to Arkansas public schools, and my kids have done very well. Just generally speaking, I'm happy with what they've done, and I think by lots of measures, you'd say they were very successful and adjusted and things like that. But I do think these things are important because other people that want to come to the state look at things like that. Anytime I tried to move anybody to a job in Russellville, the very first thing they looked at was, what do the schools look like? So I think that we all have an interest in making K through 12, and I'm assuming you guys agree with this, as best as we possibly can at the best possible price. And so, what do you, Representative Cozart, I know you've been working on different, funding formulas. Can you talk a little bit about how the schools get funded? And, I don't know a whole lot about it. I don't know if there's inequities. I don't know if it's different in one part of the state versus the other part of the state. And I'm also curious just about, after you talk about that, I don't mean to layer too much on, but I am curious what you think about the state providing the voucher programs, if you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, or just have an opinion on it in general.
Okay, well, let's just start on how they're funded. They're funded through the adequacy funding program that we do. We do an adequacy funding measure every 2 years, and we'll put up the amount. And Matt was there when we voted on that not too long ago on how much it was going to take to do this next 2 years coming up. That's basically how we fund them. We go through a big, long process of about 3.5 to 4 months of putting all the categories together on what it comes up to make that average daily attendance rate for each student. And, this year I think it's $8,100 per student per year that each child would get. It's a little less for the voucher program, which we'll get into that in a little bit because it's just a percentage off. But for public schools, they get about that amount, plus other things that are added in through the feds and other different programs would make a little more money. It's as far as being inequitable in places, it is a little inequitable. Some people have more disabled kids, handicapped kids, however you want to label them. They're special needs. So that costs a little more, and it costs more in some areas. Some people get a little more money. According to where you live, Springdale, big school, 13,000 kids, something like that in that school district up there. That's a big school, a lot to do. Their millage is probably a pretty strong millage, so they do pretty good. They have good teachers. They can pay teachers well. Bentonville, Rogers, all of those areas up in there pay pretty well. You come down to Hot Springs area in Garland County, we have 7 schools. They vary from Hot Springs District to Lakeside District to Lake Hamilton being the top 3 that pay the best, where you get Mountain Pine, Fountain Lake, and Jessaville are 3 of the schools that are going to pay a little less to their teachers. So they still teachers all the time. So that's kind of the things that happen in the inequitable parts of it. The kids are all going to get that same amount of money per school. It's just according to how much that school can spend on each one with the things. So
does just for my benefit, I know that my property tax has a millage that goes to the school district. Is the 8,100 coming from the state in addition to the millage? Is that the way for anybody to think about it?
No, that is your millage. That is your millage. It turns around. The county collects your millage, sends it to the state. They just record it, put it right back. It actually never goes to the state. It just goes right back to your school.
Okay.
The state makes up the differences. Yeah, the state makes up the differences per, let's say one of my schools over here, Mountain Pine, could not make enough through their millage to do the 8,100. The state will make up that extra difference. 25 mills is a minimum millage that any school will have. We've been thinking about raising that up to 30. So that's some of the things we've talked about to try to get some of the schools where they're better funded.
I see. Okay, so
Now,
if Russellville had enough millage to fund their school, then the state might not be giving it extra money, but for schools that need it, they'll provide that gap. Is that
they'll provide that up to that amount that we fund through the adequacy. Yes,
I see.
It'll still have to be funded. Yeah.
How do you think it should change, or should it change? Is it? What do you think?
Well, we do not fund schools in the way they're needed. That's the bill that I'm working on, and it's the funding formula that we have now is archaic. It was done back when you talked about Huckabee being there in 03 and 04 when they went through the big lawsuit, and they had to do the Lakeview lawsuit to get everything where they had to fund every school where they could make it. So that's just not changed a whole lot over that 20 years. So we're trying to bring them around. If you have special needs kids, you can't fund a special need child for 8,100. It's going to take closer to 15,000 to maybe 20,000 per student to do them. So there's a lot of different things we need to figure different on those. And I've got a formula that's student weight based formulas that we're working on. And it puts every child in the position they are, how they live, how they are, how they learn, where they live. So it's got poverty. It's got a lot of things in there. If they have dyslexia, if there's just all kinds of factors. I don't have any of that in front of me. It's all in a little rock on my desk over there. So, but that's kind of how we're working on this formula. Josh McGee, you probably know Josh McGee over there at U of A. He and I are working on putting a task force together. We actually have that together and are starting meetings on it this May. So,
and is the outcome of that to make it simpler and is it efficiency, simplicity, but also, getting the dollars in the right spot?
It is, yes, getting the dollars in the right spot, making it efficient, making it effective. When you don't have it effective, kids don't learn the right way. And
right.
So, we need all the things to come into place to make it where the need is perfection. And, we want it to be whatever they need, we want it to be available. We don't want to overfigure it, but we don't want to underfigure it. We've been underfigured in a lot of ways.
I see.
Well, Bruce, here's a question on that note. So on the other side of the coin, could you kind of explain to the viewers how, in your view, currently it's inefficient in its current form on school funding?
It's very inefficient. It's a little better than it was way back when I first got on. It was terrible. We've worked for years to bring teacher salaries up, and we had teacher salaries quite a ways up, and then Governor Sanders, made it up to 50,000, which that's something we'd worked for years. So we got that there, made a few teachers mad underneath that and around that, but that's okay. We're trying to get everybody to a place that they're not running off to Texas or Oklahoma to go to work. We need to keep our teachers here and retain teachers. But yes, it's been not effective. The old system, we tweaked it every year. We added a lot of supplemental things that were not in the matrix. We call it a matrix that we work on. It has lists from things from top to bottom, from teacher salaries, librarians, all the way down to school buses, to facilities are not in that, but from their PD, everything had a line item, and we put money in it and tried to keep it on board and going. But there's a simpler way. It's a costlier way to get started on, and that's what's been the holdback on my bill, because I tried it session before last and got shot down. I didn't even try it this time because the price tag on it this time was $680 million to get started with. So we held back. We knew we had a lot of things coming up, supposedly a prison, maybe or maybe not. We'll see that later. But so we held off, and we're working on that. Secretary Oliva has been real positive with this and on board with it, and the governor's on board with it. We've just got to get it all fine-tuned down to the right thing.
So when you, I'm curious about what you just said. So to roll out the new mechanism, what is this, whatever the number is, 600 million that you just said,
Yeah.
what does that go to? Like if you just, let's say it was a pie chart, what would that be used for?
Well, there's all those different matrix items. I mean, it's still kind of got a matrix effect. It's more of a pyramid effect, a base salary or a base effect plus all of the next steps up. I wish I had that thing in front of me. Price tag is just like we do now. As Matt has seen, we have an adequacy that we fund so much money. This year it was $200 and something million added to that. If you remember right. I can't remember exactly how much it was, but it's 200 something million added over what it already was coming. So when we were doing it, working this new one up, we started out, we were around 400 million trying to get the new ads. And then every year you would have a small ad to keep up with growth and cost of living. But it ended up being about 600 something million to get started. So we knew that was too much. So we just pulled it back. But we're working on fixing that.
So was the cost the primary reason, a cycle ago that it didn't move forward?
Yeah, it scared some of the senators. It was something new, and I didn't have a real good, and he's a great guy. My Senate sponsor was a great guy. He just didn't know anything about it. I was really the only one that knew anything about it, so it's hard to run through something through the Senate floor when you're not there to do it. So,
well, in some ways, I wonder if it gets back to the things I said earlier, which is, we declare there's a problem, but not everybody agrees that there's a problem, or we think there's different things wrong, and therefore the solution that you propose doesn't sound like a solution if you don't think there's a problem to begin with.
Yeah.
You sort of kind of lean in that. I sort of made a little list here about things that I perceive about K through 12 in the state. But I'm just curious. I don't actually know and these are just purely just opinions. So that I would tell you like my perception of things, and I have the visibility of 4 kids going through at least the Russellville School District. So one of the things that I would say, and this is I think what you were saying, is that the system is built to where there's certain groups of people that where the system as it exists it really works for them, and so. And so an example might be if you are, a high achieving student, we've got the right AP classes for you. But I also perceived that if you had issues, that you could fall to the wayside. Health issues, learning issues, maybe physical issues. That all of those things, while there was programs. There was still gaps. Is that a thing? Do you guys perceive that, or am I just wrong?
No, you're kind of on track with that. I think most of the thing about schools, they're funded per student, and some schools only have 300 students. That's not a lot of money when you try to run a school. Then you get some of the big schools, like I said, like Springdale, that's got so many kids, they get a pretty good chunk. So they have a lot of overlapping money that they could spend on special needs a little more. So if you got a lot of, say, 300 kid school, which we do have some of those, trying to fund the things that they need with that and keep the school going, keep the buses going, all those things, it's really hard on them. So when you start funding kids in the place they are, away they are, and that one, say a disabled kid or a special needs kid may get 100% more, or maybe even up to 200% more money than a normal child would get in that school just for their needs. So that's how it works on a weighted schedule or weighted scale. Yeah.
Like here's an analogy that for, I don't know if this would resonate for anybody, but it certainly is it resonates for me. So I'm guessing at this here, but I bet that the McDonald's in Russellville, I bet does, $3 million in revenue a year. And the Hardee's, that's not too far away, actually, it's no longer operating, was doing something more like 700,000.
Yeah.
And that gap was so substantial because, you think about it, and they probably have similar number of employees that have to pay similar wages, right? And, they're going to have the same maintenance issues. But if you don't have enough capital to reinvest in your business, you are going to have problems at some point, which is exactly what happened. Right.
That is exactly what happened. That is where the inadequacy comes in bigger schools, smaller schools, certain schools, millage in schools, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's another thing that I perceive. Again, I could be wrong, but I perceive that if we went back in time and we did a ratio of administration cost relative to teacher cost, that ratio has changed substantially. And I have this impression that we put a lot of rules on teachers with well intentions, like good intentions. We're trying to improve, but what we really do is create more paperwork and more admin processes and more processes just in general. Do you guys perceive that or not?
Oh, no, it's exactly. We've been talking about this for years. We tried to reduce the paperwork in a lot of things. And I think we've done some of it this year, too. But reducing paperwork for the teachers to do is something that we've been after for years, because that's what a teacher, I mean, even when I was in school, teachers had to take everything home, grade it, work at home, do things like that, bring it back, and they still have that. Some teachers have aides now that can help them, but they can't grade their papers for them, but they can help them control their classes. You talked about admin. That's one thing that I think has been a big sore spot with a lot of us. When I was, and I'm archaic now, I'm old.
Nope.
When I was in school, there was a superintendent and there was a principal that ever built it. And that was about it. Now we have multiple principals, multiple assistant principals, multiple superintendent assistants. Our administration has blown up, and the cost for that is coming out of these schools.
Matt, what do you think? Do you think that you got a view on that?
Well, let me ask you, Bruce. You brought that up, so we've gone from the older days, and it was that way when I was in school as well. So you typically had a superintendent, a principal, and the buck stopped with the principal. And to your point, they added assistant principals, assistant superintendents, et cetera. Could you kind of elaborate, on your view on that, the pros and cons with that, and kind of how we got there today?
Well, I think we've got there because it was something that if your school's big enough and you're making money, it was something that you could expand on and do that. And so it's not a bad thing. I think it really gives the principal a little extra time to do other things. If you've got an assistant principal, superintendents pretty well stay out of the way. They stay in their office unless there's a big problem. They deal with the school board and the people. So if your principals deal with everyday things in the classroom, coming out of the classroom, keeping the teachers right. If you've got an assistant, it's great, but we've got down to where we've got a lot of assistants, and we got a lot of assistant coaches. My coaches when I was a kid, they never had an assistant. And of course, like I said, we're a lot bigger now, so things have changed on sports especially. But we're putting a lot of money out there for extra positions that could be a saver if we could figure out how to do that differently. But I can't say we can do it differently by a whole lot.
So here's two other things that I sort of think. As we transition out of high school and into college, we rank 42 in total graduation. You'd like to think that we can get people out of high school. So but I don't really want to go there. What I really wanted to sort of get both of your thoughts is this. I have this view that we need to be setting our kids up for a wider swath of job opportunities, because not all jobs are going to be entrepreneurs and CEOs and work in banking. Right. Those are all noble pursuits, but we have these other things that we desperately need. And, I'm just curious, do you guys have a view on that? Matt, do you want to start? You got a view on that?
I understand what you're saying. I think that's important. I think one thing to keep in mind, though, is once students are in school and you start, giving them ideas to take opportunities for certain jobs in the future. I think one thing you can see, one thing to be mindful of, is a certain field that has need. For example, the nursing field had a huge need. But what can happen is the standards in those cases I'm not saying it was, but they can be lowered. And there's this influx of all of these students going in these nursing programs. And then what you may have on the other side of it is you may have nurses that may not quite be the quality they were when that need wasn't there, and they weren't, I don't want to say they were rushing people through the program, but, speeding people through the process of these programs where before they may be a little mindful. And that's just not just with nursing, but with any program. So I think that's something to keep in mind. But definitely there are a lot of trades and a lot of different fields I know Bruce, Andy, and I have talked about this too, and you've been in construction, you know this with electricians, plumbers, things of that nature. There's a big need. I just think it's important, though, that with the opportunity also comes the quality of the education instruction of those programs.
And I agree 100%. I've been in construction all my life. And I've always said when you start watering it down, and we try to water things down in Little Rock a lot. We try to lessen their need to be trained, to be licensed, to do things like that. I always believe that anybody that's a professional needs to be licensed in some way or another, or have a certificate to show that they are doing the job, and not just anybody can get that. You have to work for it. As you talk for nurses, you know, we have fought for nurses for many years on our 2-year college level to be able to get more nursing programs than on our 4-year college level. I think we're still behind on nurses. COVID was really hard on them. Yeah, and so we're still working on them, but they still need to be certified and licensed to be able to do the job. Our trades, Jane English and I, as chairs of education, we've worked hard for many years when I chaired with her to get more career jobs. We got the industries involved. Tyson up in North Arkansas came in and helped. And Mike Rogers, you know, was then working for Tyson. Now he works for the governor, and to helping us with our career development for many different things, heat and air, plumbing, electrical, the construction trades of all parts of it, and also in the trucking industry to get more truck drivers that are ready to go and get out on the road and do the things. So that's still a big thing for us.
Yeah, well, and you know, it's funny you say that. I tell people that come talk to me, if they don't really know what they want to do, for God's sakes, don't go and get a bland degree with a ton of debt that you didn't. I mean, you're better off coming to our company and hiring you as a driver, where you'll make, you know, a good living wage, and you can take night classes until you figure it out, and you'll be dollars ahead all day long.
Yes.
Before I switch to higher ed, I just want to get your guys' view on the voucher. So I'll tee it up and give you my view, and then you guys can tell me I'm wrong or I'm right. Okay. So on one hand, I like the idea that this is very theoretical, but if we could go back in time, let's say to the 1800s when we put in, you know, compulsory school, and you said to a parent, "Thou shalt have to educate your children." And one version you could have done was just say, "Hey, Matt, you got to educate your own kids. You just got to pay for it." But what we chose a path where you give it to the government then provides the service more or less. And so, you know, so there is this view that it's your money that you're putting in for your taxes. So in that case, you know, I like the voucher program on that side. But here in the state, though, like practically speaking, I look at it and I look at Pope County. You can already go any place in Pope County you want to go, and there are no private schools to go to. So practically speaking, I would say the voucher program has no or very little impact in Yell County and Pope County where we are. Yeah. Where I think it works is every one of my friends in Little Rock, there's kids go to PA, Episcopal, Catholic, all basically just got a bunch of money back. You know, that's just how I perceive it. Now, back to my first thing, I totally get it's your money, but it is, you know, I kind of think that's what's happening. You guys view it differently, or I could be totally wrong.
Let me give you my point. You know,
I'd love to hear it.
You know, vouchers. I fought vouchers for years. I came to. I still haven't learned to love them. I've learned to accept them. The problem I had originally with vouchers, it's not all your money. It's a lot of people that have no kids.
That's right.
It's their money, and you have a lot of people that have kids that own no property. They rent. Right. So those are the different things. It's really, you start figuring the different things. But in general, it all mixes in, and it flows, and it comes out to work. The problem I have with the voucher system, I believe, this is, you know, my buddy Lane Jean, and Matt knows him well. He said ever since we started this, it's going to blow one day. It's just not sustainable. And I think at some point we're going to see that in Arkansas if it continues to grow. It may not grow real fast because there's not a lot of places you can take kids until they build some new schools. So if they start building more private schools, then we're going to start having more influx. Now, we have a lot of homeschools, and homeschools get the same amount as long as they prove they spend the money to get that. Of course, we did limit them a little bit to 25% of some of the extracurricular stuff of the money that they get. But at some point, if this thing blows up, then they'll have to revert back and stop and shut it down to where it's a certain amount that gets it. So.
Because I perceive you can do this. Especially at this Supreme Court case that's going up there with the Oklahoma school, where all sorts of like religious institutions, et cetera. But I perceive it's pretty broad. Like if I'm educating somebody, and I'm going to make this up, and this might be silly, but like educating someone on how to fix a car engine, right? That somehow I can declare that's a school and get some money back. I'm probably wrong to say that it's that loose, but it seems to me that if you're siphoning money off the system, then boy, we should have a lot of, hopefully it's to other schools that meet at least certain standards, at least. I don't think
it's that loose. It's pretty tight.
Is it pretty tight?
Yeah, it's pretty tight. It's the homeschool was the problem, that it was pretty loose on their end, that they could do a lot of things, and we cut that back to a percentage. Like I said, you couldn't let your kids take horseback riding every day for the whole school year and pay half of your amount that you're getting for that. So, and I'm just using that for instance. They do. That is one of the things they can use, though. But it's not something they could use all that money on. They have to really do part of it for that, and other parts for the other.
Matt, you got a view on any of this?
Yeah. Well, Bruce brought up, on the horseback riding, and I remember, Bruce, I don't know if you received some of the same emails I did, but there were some criticisms in regards to the voucher program on being able to use it for horseback riding and things of that nature. But Andy, I think to Bruce's point, I believe the voucher program is a lot tighter to what he was saying than a lot of people their perception was initially, and had some concerns on it. But at the end of the day, it's nothing's perfect, and there's always going to be somebody looking for different ways to try to make a buck off of different things, and that's just
I agree.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that is true, Matt. Pretty much everything. There's always somebody who's going to scam the system. They just can't.
Yeah, Representative Wooten probably has a list of how they could do that. So
yeah, it's just okay. So let's switch to higher ed for a second. One of the things I will say about the higher ed formula is, I think that over the last, 5 or 6 years, under ASA, we put in this merit-based system. And being on the higher education board, one of the things, I love the idea conceptually, but I just wonder if when we add complexity, that we just don't get the desired results. And I'm biased because I'm from Russellville, and what it did is it baked in the inequities. So you started with, on a per student basis, these colleges are all different. And there's really no rationale for doing that. It's just that's how it was. And you've got this unfortunate situation. If you want to bring somebody else up, you got to bring somebody else down. And, you've got colleges and everything that's built around that number. And so I'm going to pivot. So I want to go to two things, then we'll shove it into a question. So on the Access Act, there's a number of aspects to it that are positive, and we've talked about these before, or at least you could perceive them as the good news. One is that it upped essentially the lottery scholarship for incoming freshmen from 1,000 to 2,000. That's probably not a bad thing. It broadens some of the tests that you can use as administration. That's not a bad thing. It eased the ways to get into the trade schools and the community college. Again, not a bad thing. I mean, if it was up to me, we would get rid of admissions and just say, hey, if you can pay, you can go. But that's another topic.
I think some of the things that they were aiming for on the higher ed, a lot of the access was basically bringing kids up to be ready for higher ed and not having as much problems when they get there. But we also have a few problems once they get there. And those three things that I'm looking at right here on this list, and was preventing institutions from granting excused absences for protesters. I don't know, on a college level, we can't stop that. We can on the high school level. Making all of the entrance, when you're applying for a scholarship, they all are the same. They're not a different one for every school. Scholarships is eliminating the barriers, and also simplifying the state universal college application to ease the admissions. That's always been a problem, because every child or kid that wanted to apply for a college, every school was different. Every college was different. They had to fill out a completely different application. I think this is going to simplify that. Now, that may not be anything we're really looking for, but I think it is for me, for my kids or my grandkids, if they could simplify the registration time or trying to figure out which school they want to and just enter which ones and see what they come up with.
Yeah, I think anything that streamlines the administration process is a good thing. And like in spite of all these different differences or these different rules, et cetera, that, the main thing is really to think long term about what's best for the student, and the issues that they've got and trying to, put yourself in their shoes. And I thought that
Well, and I'll say this too, Andy. I can't remember exactly what I said, but you used the term, Andy, earlier that it's a real popular term. A lot of things now. It's the term streamline, and to me that always brings up red flags, because for me when they use the word streamline, that means, hey, just log onto a computer. We don't want to mess with you. We don't want as much human interaction. I know that's not always the case, but when I hear that word, that's what I think. I think it's important that we protect these human to human interactions as we move forward. And like Bruce said, you said. Human in-person teaching is preferable. And I think it's important, as we as human beings have these interpersonal human-to-human interactions, is always going to be better long-term than any computer or online-based thing. I think the human-to-human element is something we need to be mindful of. I think that's good for the future of students and all of us in general.
Yeah.
And you've got to remember that every child learns differently. At different speeds, different ways, and different things. And some will never get everything. Some will get more than everything. And it's streamlining. Sometimes streamlining people fall off the bus, and we don't need to always fall off the bus.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Why don't we end it there? Representative Cozart, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Well, I've had fun. This has been a good day. So
I really appreciate it. And Matt, thank you. Appreciate you doing this. And Matt, you want to say any closing words for us?
No, I think it was a great episode. Like I said, in my view, Representative Bruce Cozart, I call him the education guru. I jokingly call him the Larry Bird of the house with his trash talking. But there's 100 members of the House, Andy, and certain members have their certain areas. Like, for example, down in Bruce, down in your area, down in Garland County, when it comes to the landlord-tenant. I go to our good buddy Representative McGrew. McGrew, so everybody's got their thing, but in my view, like I said, Bruce Cozart is the man when it comes to education. And Bruce, I want to thank you for serving the people of Arkansas and all the time, energy, and effort you've put in to serve your constituents. And like you said, as representatives, we don't just serve our own areas. We're working for the entire state. So I just want to thank you personally and professionally for that too.
And Matt, I want to thank you. Ever since you came there, you've been a great friend to me. And everywhere we go, I tell him he's my bodyguard. Don't mess with him. Don't mess with me. He'll tear your head off. So
yeah, it's probably.
I would do it.
Yes, that's probably true.
If anybody says anything bad about my friends, and that's a problem. And Bruce Cozart's been a friend. And Bruce, you were nice to me from day one. I came down there as a freshman, and you were well seasoned at it, and you've treated me with nothing but respect. And you don't forget that.
That's what we're supposed to do, and I appreciate you. Thank you.